Good evening and welcome to Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. No watches, warnings, or advisories, so first graphic here, we won't show the hazardous weather graphic. We'll jump right into the satellite imagery. Pretty good weekend coming up. No heavy weather or at all. No heavy wind, rain, or precipitation expected anywhere. Today there was a lot of clouds here, but you can see them dissipating as the day wears on, at least the higher clouds that this imagery shows up, with the main upper level system dropping southward, and some areas of light rain earlier today along with it that as it moves southward, of course lingering over the southern Kenai Peninsula, southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, but amounts were quite light with Kodiak picking about 0.06 of an inch today, but Iliamna a couple hundredths and then 1/100th over Seldovia. So nothing really significant, and that's all moving southward and out of the area, followed by a lot of clearing and dry weather that will persist through the weekend. Some clouds here grazing the eastern Arctic coast. These clouds dropping southward, dissipating, and several weak bands of moisture boundaries here, and very light precipitation out over we're actually extending here from the Alaska Peninsula all the way out across the Aleutian chain. And the one here right on top of AKwx, that brought them 0.16 of an inch of rain during the day today, with some small craft advisory level winds to go along with it, 25 knots, so maybe gusts 30, possibly 35 miles an hour, but that's about it. Definitely the high end on the wind. Over the southeast coast, this band shifting up to the northwest here, weakening throughout the day, not really bringing much precipitation to the northern areas. It was heavier down to the south, with about 1/4 of an inch at Klawock. Ketchikan had 1/3 of an inch, and those are 12-hour amounts ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And even heavier over toward the border, Petersburg having 2/3 of an inch of precipitation today. Otherwise, much lighter amounts up toward Juneau, and then not much at all any farther to the north as that system weakens. And showing the motion again, you can see moisture, the flow from north to south out here, with the upper low into the Gulf of Alaska, southeast flow on the other side of the low. So that usually signifies high pressure out here over the Bering Sea, and that's holding pretty well there. And these very weak systems having a lot of trouble pushing eastward, and the flow actually shearing them apart, directing the moisture up to the northwest. But they do make slight eastward progression, but become quite weak as they do. Some light precipitation at times today for the eastern Aleutians, and at 0.16 I mentioned at AKwx, another band back to the southwest. And for tonight, look for a lot of clear skies from the Arctic coast all the way down to Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound. Still have some showers persisting with clouds here, probably through most of the night over the Copper River Basin. They'll probably end this evening over the, I'll say the Sheep Mountain area, Talkeetnas, diminishing this afternoon, but slowly diminishing, persisting though toward morning over toward the Wrangell Mountain areas, as I mentioned. And then another front developing, bringing a chance of rain into the southern southeast coast once again. And the original front pretty much washed out, just leaving a few showers behind there in Canada. A weak trough out here to the west off the northwest coast. That's going to bring small craft advisory winds, or produce that from about Cape Thompson on up the west side of the western Arctic coast later tonight and I believe into tomorrow, but strong high pressure holds here west of Nunivak Island, or almost right on top of St. Matthew Island. And this frontal boundary right through here looking more impressive, or I drew it more impressive than it is. I don't think it'll have this solid and rain shield with it. It'll just be areas of light rain that could cover this area that I have shaded, but amounts will be quite light. Nothing more than 0.2 of an inch. And again, minimum barely reaching small craft advisory on the winds. I believe the southern marine zones there, AKwx and AKwx, carry small craft advisories through tonight. Otherwise, not too much in the way of wind. A little breezy out of the north, but that offshore flow is going to clear the skies out over Bristol Bay and a ways off the coast there. Otherwise, for tomorrow, sunshine. Temperatures 65 to 70, managed to sit in the valley tomorrow, maybe in the Kenai Peninsula. And lingering showers will linger even into the afternoon here over the Wrangell Mountains, but that's going to be really insignificant by really most of the day tomorrow. Sunshine, the rule, all the way up to the north slope. Low clouds and fog, eastern Arctic coast, but dry. And this drew it in as a warm front now, and that's going to keep a chance of moisture from possibly as far south as St. Lawrence Island, definitely through the Bering Strait, though IFR conditions right up along the Chukchi Sea in the western Arctic coast. High pressure holding over the Bering Sea. Now we have this system slipping down underneath, so easterly flow tomorrow, chance of rain over the central Aleutians, a chance of occasional rain, fog and drizzle, but definitely the Bering Sea, a big chunk here, as well as the Aleutians, will be in the IFR zone throughout the day with improving conditions. So as you head east in toward the mainland, and this system here keeps a chance of rain in over the southern panhandle, but mostly over Dixon Entrance into the south. And you can see on Sunday that slowly edges its way, really hitting the Queen Charlotte's and British Columbia coast, Vancouver Island, directing its energy there, and just barely getting out of Dixon Entrance, just a chance getting into the southern panhandle. Looks like Heidelberg, Metlakatla, otherwise mostly sunny, central and northern southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, sunshine again, and mild temperatures back well into the 60s here, south central Alaska during the day, and even sunshine up into the central interior. Back to the northwest, could be clear skies, or mostly clear, all the way to the western Arctic coast, but this trough dropping southward, definitely bringing the IFR back into the eastern coast range there, eastern Arctic coast, and even some moisture could slip right on down to the Brooks Range, but nothing south of the mountains, maybe a few clouds, and that's about it. And this rainfall very light, and temperatures warm enough, it should fall in the form of rain with the colder air now shifting off to the east. High pressure holding out here over the Bering Sea once again, other center up there off the northwest coast. So a little bit tighter gradient now, so these easterly winds may pick up here for the central Aleutians, but staying light across the Alaska Peninsula. Northwest, maybe 10 to 20. Could see some channeled areas with gusts maybe to 25, but not much of a wind problem anywhere. Flat gradient, low clouds, fog, IFR for the Bering Sea, areas of drizzle and fog combined right up to the Bering Strait. And for the low temperatures tonight, looks like 21, the forecast low in Eagle, so getting down there, and mid-20s up into the Brooks Range, upper 20s eastern Arctic coast, 40s as you head west toward the Bering Sea, mid-40s for the Pribilofs, lower 50s for the central Aleutians, and upper 40s Alaska Peninsula, 45 to 52 for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, not too bad here, 60, 65 for areas of most areas of the southeast coast, 65 to 70, 71, maybe even 72 in some areas of the Susitna Valley and the Kenai Peninsula, and well into the 60s here with the southwest interior, specifically Bristol Bay, and even the Kuskokwim Delta. Bethel in the lower 60s, 50s up to the north, and you can see warmer up there along the Arctic coast now. Upper 40s for the highs tomorrow to near 50 at Point Lay, lower 50s Kotzebue, as well as Selawik and the Kobuk Valley. Lows the following morning, not quite as cold, but still down to 23 here over the eastern interior, otherwise lower 30s. Pretty mild now along the Arctic coast, barely getting under 40 for the lows, near 50 for the Panhandle. 30s down in south central Alaska, could see some frost in some areas on Sunday morning, and 40s out to the west. Highs the following morning again, or I'm sorry, highs the following afternoon, Sunday afternoon, really nice. 65 to 70 again, the Susitna Valley, mid 60s Bristol Bay, lower 60s over the southwest interior, 40s up along the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Rolling into flying weather, again, IFR, Bering Strait here, St. Lawrence Island, into the northern Bering, and then all of the western and southwest Bering, much of the Aleutians, till you get to Unalaska Island, that's marginal VFR, on up to the Pribilofs, right on the edge of the IFR. But good VFR here, Bristol Bay, Nunivak Island mostly, Norton Sound, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Alaska Peninsula. Some marginal VFR here on the east side of Kodiak Island and kind of in and around Fognak Island. Otherwise, VFR over the interior, the marginal VFR as far east as possibly Aliktok, and a little bit of marginal VFR here with some lingering showers that are lingering into early tomorrow morning, eastern Alaska range there, and possibly the Talkeetnas, or not the Talkeetnas, the Wrangels. And then the southern southeast coast, a little bit of marginal. For the afternoon, marginal VFR down south here. with some obviously lower ceilings, but much better VFR to the north. This area dissipating but lingering into the afternoon. It may could be gone by late in the afternoon, and some marginal VFR kind of hanging in along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Good VFR interior all the way down Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, all of Nunivak Island now. Pribilof's marginal with the IFR backing off to the west a little bit, as well as over the Aleutians here. Atka, Adak on out to Shimianat-2 in the IFR zone, northeast into the Bering Strait. And then for Sunday morning, right along the Yukon Delta coast, south coast of the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Strait, right up to almost into Kivalina. We've got IFR, eastern Arctic coast, otherwise marginal for the North Slope. VFR holding here over the interior. Still that persisting area of marginal VFR possible, mainly over the Wrangell Mountain areas, and VFR holding over Bristol Bay, but looks like some marginal VFR on the increase here on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island, VFR, the Panhandle VFR. And then slipping in again to the southern southeast coast, we got some marginal VFR in store for that area on Sunday afternoon, but good VFR to the north. Kodiak Island, Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast, northward, much of the interior until you get to the northern upper Yukon Valley there. Actually, you start getting up into the southern slopes of the eastern Brooks Range. Then from there on out to the Arctic coast, pretty marginal. IFR advancing inland now up there into across the Noatak Valley, Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, along the Yukon Delta coast, but Kuskokwim Bay, as well as the Delta. And of course, the valleys here staying VFR through the entire day Sunday. And Bristol Bay, northern areas, stay VFR, but you can see this area encroaching and conditions deteriorating, trying to push in, but mostly affecting the Alaska Peninsula. IFR from Adak west. Passes Anatuvik, VFR tomorrow, same forecast for Adigan. Pretty good VFR flying for both those passes, as well as Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR rainy, same forecast. Ceilings visibility is mostly unlimited. And for windy, VFR. Isabel, same forecast VFR, but again, been tasked with that area of moisture sort of hanging in over the eastern mountains there. Starting out marginal, but I think it will become VFR in the afternoon. And for Tanita, VFR the entire day, same forecast for Portage. Really good there through the Portage Valley, Turnagain Arm on out to Whittier. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, see the cold air now shifting off to the east over the Northwest Territories, but still at the surface here into the, looks like the White Mountains right near the Tanana Valley, northward there to the eastern Arctic coast. Warmer conditions with upper level high pressure, cool pockets slipping off to the southeast there, and basically 6,000 feet here over the, or roughly 6,000 to 8,000 feet eastern interior, and then kind of a ridge axis, thermal axis right here, 14,000 feet up in that area, and that extends down toward the eastern Aleutians, then starting to cool off again, 8,000 feet over the western Aleutians. And icing, not a lot, above about 7,000 feet, just very isolated areas of mixed rime icing, mostly light. Jet stream, big upper level high here. Northeast flow, 90 knots coming out of the northeast. That's dry. Big upper level low here in the eastern Pacific, keeping the jet well to the south. And then southeast winds here affecting the western Aleutians. And 3,000 feet, or 9,000 feet, northeast 20 to 25 through the interior. Low pressure in this area, easterly flow for the Panhandle, westerlies 20 on the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 for that next low. Same thing at 9,000 feet here, ridging through the interior, at 3,000 feet, and turbulence not much in the way of anything significant.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Again, not a lot of difference from yesterday or the day before, or really much this week here. Still off the coast here, a fair distance north of Point Barrow, but down back around the 1.5 mile range around Kaktovik and in very close to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. There's quite an area of ice, of heavier ice out here, and not expected to change much for the next 5 days. And coastal water forecast, east to southeast winds 20 knots down on the south coast, east 25, small craft advisories on the north coast, diminishing back to 20 knots from the northeast. Farther on up to the north. Lynn Canal, pretty breezy there tomorrow. Stiff north wind, sustained 30 knots, 6-foot seas, 20 knot winds from the north for Stevens Passage. Southeast 20 for Clarence Strait with seas at 5 feet. And for Sunday, no change here for Lynn Canal, so pretty breezy. Those north winds continue at 30 knots. And north 20, now gale force gusts showing up in Stevens Passage, so much windier there on Sunday. Northeast 15 for Clarence Strait. East increasing here. Next frontal system beginning to kick those winds up. Small craft advisories up to 30 knots on the south coast. Seas building to 11 feet, diminishing as you go north here. Winds just north of 15 there in the extreme north coast. Prince William Sound, north 15, seas 3 feet. North to northeast 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast with 5 to 6 foot seas. North at 20 for the Barren Islands as well as Kamishak Bay. And also for Cook Inlet, north winds up to 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. And for Sunday, coming down northwest, still nothing but sun out here, and lighter winds with seas coming down to 2 feet, northwest 15, increased to 20 knots there from Kamishak Bay to the Barrens. Down, light winds, barely a breeze, not even a breeze really. Northwest at 10 with 4-foot seas, about the same in Prince William Sound. And for Kodiak Island on the east side, north 20 knots, seas 7 feet, small craft advisory, Shelikof Strait. North 25 knots, and then Bristol Bay north of 15, the Alaska Peninsula. North winds 15 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. Outlook for Sunday, even lighter winds, west-southwest for the peninsula here at 10 knots with just 3 to 4 foot seas. Northwest 15 for Bristol Bay. Turn westerly there as they cross the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Range. West 15 on up in Shelikof Strait. Northwest 15 there on the east side of Kodiak Island. And for Unalaska Island, northeast 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Unmak Island, east 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. And Adak and Atka, easterlies at 20, that'll extend all the way out to Amchitka Island there, and then from Kiska Island on out to Shimianatu, northeast of 15 with 7-foot seas. Those pick up here with that tightening gradient with the system down to the south and persisting high pressure here. So that's enough of a squeeze in the atmosphere to give 25 to 30 knot winds. Doesn't look like gales at this point in time. Seas though 11 to 12 feet here with those 30 knot winds. Lighter winds for the western zones, about 20 knots out of the east, and northeast 15 for Unalaska Island, and 20-25 there for Umak Island. And for the southwest coast, north winds 15 to 20 knots, strongest south of Nunivak Island, with those seas only 3 to 4 feet though, northeast 15 for the Pribilof, south 15 St. Matthew Island, southwest 15 for St. Lawrence Island. No wind virtually there for Norton Sound, north at 5 with seas 1 foot, and then west 10 the next day on Sunday, 15 knots St. Lawrence Island here out of the west. Northwest 10 to 15 along the coast, northeast 15 for the Pribilofs, and west at 15 for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west to southwest, 15 to 20 knots. Strongest there for the eastern zone, far eastern zone. Southwest 15 on the central coast. Windier here back to the west. Small craft advisories actually maybe kicking in tonight. 25 knots west side all the way down to Cape Thompson, and Cape Thompson to Wales, south of 20. And for Sunday, much lighter winds in store for all these areas, except over here in the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, still west 20 knots, but coming down northwest 10 on the central coast all the way down to Cape Thompson. And then for the Chukchi Sea, west at 10 with 3-foot seas. And for tonight, clear skies all the way out to the Arctic coast, especially on the east side here. Lower conditions on the west side with this system pushing in, and that's going to generate those small craft advisories for the marine areas. Otherwise, showers persisting, looking pretty good up here now north of the Alaska Range with this moisture persisting, Copper River Basin, and just this evening for the Talkeetna Mountains, but lingering most of the night over toward the Wrangels. And chance of rain, southern panhandle, chance of light rain at times with this weak boundary out here, barely a front in the Aleutians and southwest Bering. And for Saturday, sunshine, and Sunday, a repeat sunshine with temperatures in the 60s.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.